So what is the infinite wisdom of the internet drummed up for us today? As we know, it's illegal to like Star Wars Outlaws, so I guess I'm gonna get locked up for this. But while I admit it's not perfect, a lot of criticism and bad reviews seem to be coming from people who haven't even played the game. I too thought this game looked pretty bad, but playing it is another thing. So why all the hate? I want to discuss the negativity, hate, and general thoughts towards the game, and offer some counterpoints to maybe make you think twice about Star Wars Outlaws. As someone who's played over 36 hours and finished the story, I think I can offer an alternative point of view. Now before I get the usual dumb comments calling me a Ubisoft shill, I will say I constantly have bad things to say about Ubisoft, and I will address some of those in the video too. Also, I get like an average of 600 views on my videos. You really think Ubi's paying this failure of a content creator jack shit to promote them? Don't be stupid. Okay, let's start with the worst criticisms and work our way towards the lesser evils as they have been discussed on the internet. So there is nothing I can say to defend the early access game-breaking bug that made some people on PS5 have to restart their playthroughs even after hours of playing. Some people had the wrong version of the game, which had progression blockers that any game started on that version would eventually get stuck and unable to finish the game. This is unacceptable and extremely troubling. The affected players were emailed and compensated with a terrible in-game cosmetic and 100 Ubisoft points. This is also indefensible. Players should have been refunded, at least the extra money they spent on early access. I despise the early access bullshit they keep pulling, as it is, but imagine paying extra and getting screwed like this just to be reimbursed with basically nothing at all. Ubisoft is not a good company, and it is not at all consumer friendly. The way they monetize their games and how they sell them is an absolute disgrace. I will not defend these pricing models or any of the stunts they pull. Ubisoft should be criticized for this, and I will continue to do so every time it crops up. I personally experienced a decent amount of bugs, but luckily none of them were game breaking, but there was probably a little too many for a released game. I would have liked a bit more polish. Bugs are unavoidable, but I think there was just too many in Star Wars Outlaws, suffering multiple crashes and many visual bugs or bugs where I needed to reload a save. So with that out the way, I would like to start discussing the actual game itself, which is mostly what I want to defend. Firstly, there's the sentiment that the game is made for no one. I don't really understand this. I think it is a very interesting idea to see the world of Star Wars not through the eyes of a Jedi or a star pilot, but through the eyes of a regular person with no amazing powers or credentials. Just a regular person trying to make it in an Empire-run galaxy. Why wouldn't you want to play that? We've had many Jedi games or other people of power within the galaxy, but never have we followed a regular person and seen them navigate a vast galaxy with nothing more than a blaster and their cute best friend. I love being a Jedi, but I also like winning as an underdog, and that's what Kay is. Kay and Nix overcome the odds time and time again in a world in which they should just fail and fall in line like everyone else. If someone could tell me why this isn't a compelling narrative thread instead of no lightsaber, no force powers boring, because that's just immature, that would be great. I just don't understand that. That's why I like the Andor TV show so much. It was just a regular guy in a world of tyranny and intense power, fighting back against it. Okay, let's address probably the stupidest comments I've seen. People say this game has PS3 graphics. Like, I didn't even play on PC, but the world still looked amazing. Tashara, Akiva, and Kijimi are all beautiful and look amazing. Tatooine is just Tatooine, but cool nonetheless. It's awesome for nostalgia and going around a planet we've never really been able to explore like this before, but I mean, it is just sand, and I hate sand. This is the same team and engine that Avatar was made on. There's no way this world is anything short of beautiful. The cities feel so alive, there's a pretty decent crowd density, and it just feels like Star Wars. This is the closest I've ever felt to actually being in the Star Wars universe. The atmosphere and vibe are perfect in my opinion. The way you pick up quests just by talking to unassuming characters who call you over, or the way you have to investigate things is just interesting, and it all felt great. Unfortunately, the facial animations and details are, shall we say, less than ideal. I don't know why Ubisoft can't do facial animations anymore, but sheesh, they are rough. There are a few pre-rendered cutscenes in the game that look absolutely gorgeous, but anything in-engine is frankly quite scary. I am nothing if not fair, so I will concede that the faces probably look worse than some of the best PS3 games. But the world itself is the best part about this game and nails the tone, mood, and ambience that just radiates Star Wars, and for that alone, I think it's worth a playthrough. Also, even though it's a bit weird at first, I would recommend playing in widescreen, even if you don't have a widescreen monitor. It makes it feel so much more Star Warsy. Now along this same vein, we have the silly talk about Kay being purposely unattractive or ugly. I'm gonna be real with you. I don't know where these people live, because if Kay is ugly, then you must be surrounded by tens all day every day. Instead, I imagine most of the people saying this are stuck in their third cousin's fourth removed on their mum's side father's basement watching prawn all day. Now, while there's no evidence for it, I'm sure discussions were made about not making her overly sexual or anything like that, but there is no way in hell that Kay is ugly. Now, she can look decently scary because of the terrible facial animations, but that is no comment on her design. The argument seems to be that this is a DEI game and to stay away. But nowhere in the 36 hours did I see any evidence of this trying to send a message about anything other than the usual messages of Star Wars. I didn't notice any types of characters being forced into stories or any mentions of messages typically associated with DEI. It was just a good time in the Star Wars universe that fit perfectly with the established lore of a galaxy far, far away. Finally, onto some gameplay now. I think the general sentiment is that the gameplay loop is repetitive, and over the playthrough time it can become boring. Now, while this isn't strictly false, it is repetitive. I didn't find myself getting bored with it. There were enough tiny additions as the game went on to keep it fun. There is no doubt it could be much, much better, and isn't a highlight by any means, but it was decent enough for me to have a great time and kept me engaged for the full 36 hours, especially after I realized that the run and gun playstyle or hip firing was the way to go for combat. Don't aim down sight, trust me. Stealth could have used a few more options, however, once again, it was enough. It carried on the main character being out of her depth theme, as it seemed like a mammoth task sneaking into Imperial bases, starships, and Syndicate hideouts undetected, and once spotted turned into utter chaos. People are calling it a shallow open world, and I very much disagree. There is loads to do, it's just that the rewards for doing so are trash. Usually I love hunting for cosmetics in these kinds of games. Having a new look for your character can be very rewarding, and while most of Kay's outfits and armor are great, all the other cosmetics are basically non-factors. Equipping a skin for your speeder or ship is basically worthless. You cannot tell while driving your speeder, and the Trailblazer isn't much better. I think this has to do with the Star Wars' washed out tones that don't lend themselves well to cosmetics of this kind, but I think they could have been much, much better. I love the exploration in Outlaws, but the rewards were often not worth it. It felt like a small gear system of armor and cosmetics stretched thin over a gigantic world. Lockpicking and hacking were interesting. I liked both methods, but had turned off the hacking minigame, which is basically Wordle, by the 20-hour mark. However, the lockpicking rhythm game was a mainstay that I enjoyed very much even up until my final hour. It felt intense, like you could get spotted at any moment, especially on some of the harder ones. You have to be pretty accurate for some of these. Combat is interesting, having to switch blaster modes on the fly for different situations and enemies felt good and rewarding when you pulled it off perfectly. The blaster also had a bunch of customization options so you could make it your own and play the way you want to with it. Enemy AI wasn't great, but I never noticed it being as bad as it was in the gameplay that IGN released. I will say that the movement and parkour is pretty bad in this game, and I didn't enjoy it much at all. The best part of this game is the Syndicate system, a push and pull between syndicates as you do jobs for them throughout the galaxy. In some cases, you can just screw over certain syndicates. If you have good reputation or higher with a syndicate, you can walk freely through their bases. Not all of it, but a large majority of it. You also get rewards for each tier that you reach. Some of the best gear is unlocked by getting to max reputation with a syndicate, which I think is really cool. Missions have options where you can side with the mission giver or help another syndicate gain power over them. They will offer rewards such as more money to screw over the other syndicate that gave you the job. I think the push and pull of the system is great and feels impactful. You can also get hunted down if you get some of the syndicates to terrible reputation. However, none of this is permanent. You can get any syndicate to a higher rep just by doing jobs for them. Let's talk about the story. I have nothing but good things to say about it. Kay seems like a real person. She has real motivations and feelings. When I saw the trailers, I thought it was going to be another overly jokey Marvel-like character that I have seen all too often since the success of the Marvel Galaxy. But thankfully, her stupid jokes were kept to a minimum and felt more natural when they did occur. I wouldn't say her writing is anything special, but it serves its purpose. She wouldn't win any awards, but I think it's perfectly fine for a story and a game like this. Her relationship with Nix is actually pretty special, and I enjoyed the interactions they had. There were some good emotional moments between them too, and I really liked the food eating scenes, which fleshed them out as buddies more. They could have been a little shorter, and I don't really like the button prompt thing. That's been overdone by now. Kay's voice actor, Humbly Gonzalez, did a phenomenal job in my opinion. There were a few parts where I really felt the emotional weight of the situation, especially during a certain scene during my time on Tatooine. All other characters were great too. I didn't notice any bad voice acting in this, which is quite rare, and I thought all the characters were developed sufficiently and told a great story. Speaking of the story, there are a few lulls, but that's to be expected. A bit of criticism has been shown towards it, saying it had pacing issues. But again, I didn't notice. I think that's the nature of open world games anyways. You go off for hours chasing side quests or items and then return to the main quest. The ending few hours are pretty great when all of the game sequences start to come together. I don't want any spoilers here, so I can't discuss specifics, but the ending is just well written, with a few surprises and a few obvious things too. But all in all, largely a win in the story category, which again just felt like the Star Wars I love. A lot of the bad reviews are zeros, which should basically be ignored, as should 10s, but I think this is a large reason why the average is so low. I would hazard a guess that the real average from human beings that aren't absolute psychopaths is more of a 7, which is about where I'd land. 7s are still good games, and I would hope that eventually more people give this game a go. Let me know down in the comments what you think, and smack that like button if you enjoyed it. Thanks to Alex Applegate for your support on Patreon as always. Sticks out.